Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. And we have a new one here, Shelob, Child of Ungoliant. Ungoliant? Yeah, Ungoliant Spider Tribal. This deck comes to us from Jesse, who says that this is their spider deck. I mean, they say, here's my deck list if you want to do a video. Please no combo and minimal tutors. I want spiders. Tutors always fun though. I asked him what minimal tutors meant. He didn't get back to me. So here we are, looking at a Shelob deck. As always, the deck list will be in the video description below. If you are a fan of spiders and if you're a fan of tribal, let's take a look at this deck. Let me know if you think of anything I don't, and post in the comments below. Who is Shelob and why are we using her? Well, Shelob is honestly a very scary commander. I really like her. She is 6 mana in black and green, an 8/8 spider demon. She has Death Touch and Ward 2, and other spiders you control gain Death Touch and Ward 2. Whenever another creature dealt damage this turn by a spider you control dies, create a token that is a copy of that creature, except for it's a food artifact instead of being a creature. So this is so cool. Basically, as you use your spiders to destroy creatures, you will get food versions of those creatures. So I think that should be our main game plan because there are a lot of creatures in the format that get considerably stronger when they're not a creature. For example, if you can grab Devoted Druid, which I don't think you can because they're just probably going to sacrifice it in response. But just as an example, a card like Devoted Druid goes infinite. You get infinite green mana if she's not a creature. More realistically, though, if we look at cards like Thalia, we look at cards like Dark Confidant, we look at cards like, I don't know, let's just say Esper Sentinel. The thing that really, oh well, actually Esper Sentinel doesn't work because it's reliant on power. Let's go back to Thalia. The thing that really holds Thalia back from being the greatest is the fact that she is a creature and therefore easy to remove. However, if you turn her into a Thorn of Amethyst, well, it changes a little bit. All of a sudden, she's a lot harder to interact with. And through this transformation, it gives us a way to kind of interact with the ability because it is a death trigger and then it is a creation trigger. Well, not a creation, but it is the creation of a token. And we can see here, our deck builder has already been thinking about this, and Parallel Lives would create 2 of those food tokens, turning 1 Thalia into 2, which is something you generally cannot do. Does it stay legendary? Maybe that is a problem. But 2 Tarkophidons are better than 1. Let's go to Shelob. Does it say anything about the creatures being legendary? No. I imagine they're still legendary because it's a copy. They lose other types. You can have legendary food tokens, so it does have a limit, but it is very, very interesting. So how are we going to make this happen? Well, right now the deck's set up to play an inordinate amount of spiders of varying strengths and then support them with a pretty good cycle of cards here, and then attack our opponents and honestly kind of hope they block. I don't particularly like this strategy. I think we should not give our opponents the option of whether or not they should block. We should take that away from it. So there's two ways we can do this. The first one is I'm going to say what we consider bite cards. Now, these bite cards will most likely push out any removal that we really need in the deck. For example, looking at Putrefy, looking at Go for the Throat, well, we don't really need that anymore. Let's go into CMC. Let's look at something straightforward as aggressive instinct or bite down at instant speed. Same mana cost. You will use your creature that has death touch because of your commander, and I would say a lot of our general spiders will have death touch anyways. Go put it into mana value. A lot of these spiders are going to naturally have death touch anyways, and so all of a sudden we can start using those spiders as removal. And once again, with Shelob out, each time our spiders bite someone, which I believe is obviously the flavor, though I think she stings and she doesn't bite for her poison. Every time we do that, we are going to convert that creature on the other side of the battlefield into a food token. And you know what every deck has? A really powerful creature, commonly known as a commander. I use my decks as an example a lot, but if you, for example, took my infect commander, whose name I cannot remember, but right now they ETB and give you 3 mites. Well, all of a sudden you've gotten 3 mites. If you take my Brina, you now have a Brina on your side of the field that doesn't die to removal, traditional removal, which is really, really cool. If you start taking any type of creature that has any utility, mana dorks, draw engines, disruption, any of these cards all of a sudden stay on your side, and in a pinch, you can eat them for life. So, with that in mind, first thing is I want a ton of ways for us to start biting down on our opponents. Generally, what I'm going to suggest is starting with the 2 mana ones, and then the rest don't particularly matter. A lot of the higher mana ones will do abilities that like will make your creature stronger. This will create a food token. Yeah, this will give it more power. We don't really need these because our creatures are going to have death touch, right? Wing Puncture and Chain Web Arachneer, which I don't think is in here, which I wish it was because it's a one mana recurable spider, which I think is probably a pretty good rate. Both of these only hit flyers. I think I would still play them because there's a lot of very good flyers, and Wing Puncture is definitely playable as it is instant speed and destroy target flying creature, gain a copy of it is pretty ridiculous, right? So I would go through a lot of these cards are probably incredibly cheap, 30 cents, 10 cents. They're not seen as particularly strong cards, with Ram Through probably being the strongest one because excess damage is pushed through to the player, which I know you have Brawn, so you could actually do that. But even with that in mind, I'm going to say that it doesn't particularly matter because you're just going to be happy to get the copy from your opponent. It doesn't particularly matter the extra bonuses. This one doesn't work. We don't have wolves or werewolves. So that's the first thing I'd like to do. I would like to be adding these spells that will allow us to immediately start paying out our opponents. The next one we're going to do with the same method is we are going to look at fight cards. Same thing, we'll go to mana value and we'll see how many that we can pick up. Especially when we look at creatures such as, let's see, a few of these just naturally, like Deadly Recluse just naturally has Death Touch, and a few others, I believe, yeah, Reach and Death Touch. Fight effects are incredibly powerful with these because, especially because spiders have very high toughness generally, you're gonna probably keep your spider as well. Now, Blizzard Brawl might, I don't think it's worth going into snow. Just look at it as a 1 mana thing. Bushwhack, which I believe, is this in here? It is not in here. Bushwhack should definitely be in here, as once again, it is a 1 mana fight. Prey upon, you know, The green creature fights another green creature, so not that one. But Bushwhack, Prey Upon, Primal Might, these are all Savage Swipe, which grows your creature, which is funny. A lot of spiders will be able to do that. Tail Swipe, also very, very strong. I would definitely go to grab Tail Swipe because it's instant speed. All of these are very powerful to use with your spiders to destroy your opponent's creatures and then get them back. And then finally, the last kind, I'm going to find the card first and then I'm going to find the text. Let's say, so lure cards are cards that force blocking. And for those who aren't familiar, the way Death Touch works is so when we do blocks, you only need to put as many as enough damage with each creature as for it to be lethal. And with that in mind, Death Touch 1 point of damage is lethal. So having a lure effect, which seems like lure is probably the most reasonable one to play. So having lure, you play lure, you attach it to, let's say, a 2 mana, 2 power Death Touch creature, such as Kessick Recluse. All of a sudden, that creature can block, block 2 creatures, kill them both, and you'll get 2 food out of it. Now, this one's tricky because your opponent picks the order of the blocks. So it could be you actually want something a little higher in power, such as Declare Dominance, which will give +3/+3, which then guarantees 3 additional creatures you can destroy off a player. But it's a little tricky to make work because you need a bunch of creatures you want. You need all of those creatures to belong to the same opponent, and then you need to attack with this and make sure the blocking order works out. That no matter what, you're going to get the creature. You're going to get all of the creatures. I think this is very, very strong. I would probably only play the one Declare Dominance, which once again is a very, very cheap card. So I would be considering that whole set of cards could replace most of your removal very easily, and then you're just going to start stealing these creatures, turning them into food, and getting incredibly far ahead on board. This is one of those strategies that as you grow in power, your opponents grow weaker because they're losing these creatures, and you are gaining them back. The next thing I want to talk about is Shelob is 6 mana. 6 mana, it's 6 mana, but you actually want like 8 mana, right? Because you want to play her, and then you want to hold up one of your bite spells or your fight spells in order to immediately get value from her. Like Shelob is very frightening. Despite being a very good card, she's also an 8/8. I don't understand why they decided to make her so scary. If she was a 2/8, she would be just as scary. But with an 8/8, she's just ridiculously scary. She represents three attacks onto an opponent to defeat them with commander damage. And with that in mind, Shelob isn't long for the world unless you are, doing very like you plan around her very well. So I want to get her out faster, and I want her to be able to get put out again. So with that in mind, I want to play creatures gain mana. I want to play cards. This is a bit tough. I want to play cards that allow our creatures to tap for mana as a form of ramp. Because something we do have that is very natural to spiders is you're going to get a lot of them. A lot of spiders either create more spiders, or a lot of spider spells also create, like if we look at spider spawning, if we look at, where is our instant spell? Arachnogenesis. If we look at things like the shadow spiders or is it Twin Silk? Yeah, Twin Silk Spider. They create a lot of bodies. And being able to turn these bodies into mana is particularly good. Song of Freelies is really, really good here because it gives you 2 turns of turning your spiders into mana, and then immediately after, it has a small overrun effect. But this overrun effect is really, really good in so many ways in this deck because of the Death Touch. Because it makes your team basically unblockable, which is particularly powerful. But also, it works well with like once Shelob is out and you have any fight spells. Now that your creatures are indestructible, you're just free to use any fight spell you want that turn with no consequence on your side. The other one I think is a lot more expensive. It's not here. Let's see. It would be it's one and a green, so 2 mana, green, enchantment, creatures you control, gain, get maybe? I don't remember right now. Creatures you control. Let's just do that one and see what we get. Cryptolith Rites. Yes, unfortunately a $10 card to begin with, but an absurdly powerful card at that. That just turns your creatures permanently into Birds of Paradises. Very, very nice. Especially if we are going wide. Looking with the same thing, if there's anything at 2 mana that does that. Unfortunately, there is not, but particularly good. Beyond that, looking at that, we have 3 visits. Is 3 visits our only 2 mana ramp? Nature's Lore as well. I think Farseek or a few others couldn't hurt, but otherwise it is a good collection. You have 36 lands. It's a good amount of lands. The next thing I wanna think about is Shelob's ability is very strong, but let's think of its defensive ability, where the creatures we control get Ward 2, including Shelob. Ward 2 is substantial. It's enough that it's pretty annoying to have to kill them with targeted removal. Now, I might go in briefly into protecting Shelob, but before we get to that, I want to talk about how that kind of skews your deck to be vulnerable to board clears, which is not necessarily a bad thing because you are in black. Living Death immediately comes to mind as a way for you to get back your board after losing it to a board clear while being a board clear out of itself. And then, oops, Patriarch. Patriarch's bidding is also something just like that, which is particularly good in tribal decks, as you get to pick your tribe and get all those creatures back, and gets worse when your opponents are not playing tribal decks, which is, I would say, most of the time. And to be honest, this deck trumps a lot of tribal decks just by the virtue of having Death Touch. Tribal decks generally will go wide and tall with their creatures and have these kind of combos, and you can just pick off their strongest tribal cards, and they can't really attack into you profitably because you have very high health and Death Touch on your creatures. So both of these cards kind of come to mind. After that, for Shelob herself, Feign Death effects, you could play 1 or 2. I'm not sure if I would. Maybe the Malkir Mire, what was it called? Malkir Rebirth, is a little more attractive because it at least will let you you can play it as a land. But having at least one card that can reanimate Shelob in a pinch isn't bad. Ward 2, like I said, is substantial, but Shelob is incredibly scary. So the idea of leaving her there, even if I have to use my whole turn, feels particularly scary. Also, with that in mind, it does make you, if you're using a fight spell with let's say a spider without Death Touch, even with a spider with Death Touch, if they destroy Shelob in response, you kind of lose a lot of the benefits there. If they didn't have Death Touch, all of a sudden your spell is completely wasted. If they did have Death Touch, at least you'll still destroy that creature and you won't have a bad time. Alternatively, our other indestructible, and it's Tyvar. I just talked about this in the last video. Tyvar Stand could be good here because it also represents hexproof and indestructible, which is better than Ward, obviously, and can completely protect Shelob. But it also, the additional power isn't nothing, especially with spiders, especially with specific blocks. Shelob doesn't need the additional power. She is massive, but some of your other creatures might have a good time with it. All right. Last thing I kind of want to lean into is I think the deck can use a tiny bit more card draw. I notice outside of Guardian Project and maybe Lifecrafter's Beastery, a lot of the draw is one off. I wouldn't mind having some recurrable draw. As I always say, Phyrexian Arena and Underworld Connections are the first two I would go to. They're low mana. They're going to represent a lot of card draw over turns. Another one here that you have access to as a tribal deck, because unfortunately, Pact of the Servant. It's a few dollars. Choose a creature type. You draw that many cards, and lose that much life for the creatures of that creature type you control. Technically, it's target player, but I don't know why you would target anyone else with this. This represents 3 mana, draw 6-ish. I play this in the elf deck. I think this is just a fantastic card. It is reliant on you having spiders out, but you play a lot of spiders, so it's not awful. After that, I think like Guardian Project is very good, so I think that's fine. A few other things coming to mind. Who is our, I forget what they're called. Dying Trigger. Drivnod. Drivnod is a few bucks, which isn't bad, but Drivnod is particularly good because Drivnod will double Shelob's triggers, so you will get 2 food tokens. Um, I think it's fine. You're playing Parallel Lives, which I like, and Drivnod is just another kind of Parallel Lives while being, a beater if nothing else. And I will say, for what it's worth, they do actually work together really well because Drivnod is not like it's not the same effect. So you have Drivnod out, you'll get 2 triggers, and then Paralyze will see each of those triggers and put 2 foods out. That's really cool. I think it's fine. I'll leave that up to you. I know it's not a spider is one of the things, but you're also playing Brawn, which is not a spider, so I can say whatever I want. But Drivnod would be something worth considering as a non-spider creature, and I'm being very picky. There's a lot of non-spider creatures we could put into this, but I don't think I want to do that. And I'm also not suggesting changelings, even though I could, because a lot of them aren't particularly interesting for this deck. But Drivnod kind of sticks out to me, so I would definitely consider Drivnod if you like that effect and want it one more time. Now, here is the difficult part of this conversation. You are a spider tribal deck, and I'm about to ask you to cut some spiders. I know it's heresy, but it is what we're going to do. What's really interesting about spiders is a lot of the spiders that you have are very good at these strategies at low mana costs. So like Deadly Recluse having Death Touch, same with Ruin Recluse, um, Gloom Widow is fine. Lantern of War, Green Widow can be particularly strong, right? It's permanently battlefield, exile it instead. This ability. Yes, so it just costs. So it's 8. It costs 6. I think that's fine. You need playable spiders, and the body is pretty good. Nyx Weaver is great. Um, Sporecraft Spider is terrible. Spore Weaver is good. There's a lot of tongue twisters, I feel. Arasta is fantastic. Broodweaver is fine. Grave Robber Spider is fine. Hoarding Recluse is fine. Honestly, if it has Death Touch, I'm not going to be mad. I think Death Touch is great. If it creates another spider, I think that's great. If it does any other effect that is somewhat reasonable, like Skyfisher Spider is great, Acid Web Spider is okay, Ishkana is fantastic. A lot of these are fine. It's this last little bit that I don't particularly like. See, I don't actually know stats. There we go. The ramp goes on quite a bit more than I would like. I purposely not looked at the mana ramp because I knew this would happen. So I wanted to hold that out to the end. Can we go back to the deck, please? No. There we go. A lot of these higher mana ones I'm going to consider not worth it. Sentinel Spiders is a 4/4 Vigilance Reach. It doesn't even have Death Touch. I don't want to say this is terrible, but it's pretty terrible. Sicklash is pretty good because you are giving it Death Touch, and all of a sudden it can deal, for 3 green mana, destroy every creature with flying is insane. So I love Sicklash Spider here. Stinger Fling Spider, not as good because we have Silk Slash. Watcher of the Web, not great. You don't need to block 7 creatures. But with okay, you know what? With Death Touch, I changed my mind. That's pretty cool. And then Doomweaver is fine. Sky Snares is not good. Sweet Gum is okay. Archweaver and Goliath Spider don't do anything. They just have reach, and they're too much mana, unfortunately. So those need to be cut. And Hatchery Spider is good. I would have to cast it enough times. I don't know how good, but I think it would be good. You don't have a lot of ways to put your creatures by yourself into the graveyard, so I think it's probably going to get 3 cards down and get a land. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's actually fine. It's still it's a very big spider. I do really like it. So I think at least with the ETB, it's better. Whereas Goliath Spider costs more mana, has a worse stat line, and only has reach. So what do we do with this conundrum? Well, I think it wouldn't hurt to cut some of those bigger spiders. I'll leave that to you. But in addition, I'm just going to close these ads. In addition, I think we have room for playing like a few a few things that can kind of make sure that we get the spiders that we want. And before we do that, I should actually look if we're missing any spiders with Death Touch, right? I don't know. First, I have to spell Death Touch correctly. But looking at a glance, that is a smaller list than I thought it would be. That's really funny. Interesting. But Mirkwood Spider should definitely be in there. It's 1 mana, it has Death Touch, it has everything you need. It is a fight creature and it works great with Shelob. You should put that in over any of the high mana spiders. I think Hoarding Recluse is already in there. I like that. Let's see if there's any more spiders that will deal damage to things. Chainweb, Drider. Are you playing? I think you are playing Drider. You are not. Please play Drider. Drider's fantastic. It is a spider that creates more spiders. It is 5 mana, but I think that's fine because it generates more spiders. And with your deck, it's actually pretty easy for you to take advantage of the extra spiders and get attacks in unblocked. Because, well, once this becomes a death touch, it gets harder to block. It's already a 4/3, but then you can start pinging down blockers to make sure Drider gets through. Sporeweb Weaver is already here, and I really do like. I hate that it doesn't make spiders, but it's still pretty good. Which will be the last thing we look at in case we're missing anything is the word create. And a lot of these that you can play are already here. What is the Thran Spider? You and target opponent create a tap Power Stone. Look at the top 4. You may reveal. No, okay, not here. This is an artifact deck. It is not a spider deck. Sorry, it's an artifact card, not a spider card. So I think you have most of the really, really good ones. And so what you can do if you wanted to, because he said some tutors are fun, the ones I would immediately put in that is missing is Profane Tutor, because it is just a few bucks and you just have to wait a little bit. And then up to you, I don't know how expensive Eldritch Evolution is these days. Okay, it's a little higher, but it can't hurt. And then there's this card that I play in a similar black-green deck, which it's going to take me a second to remember what it is. Green, enchantment, 2 mana, sacrifice. It is Evolutionary Leap. Excuse me, Evolutionary Leap. Evolutionary Leap is really, really good. I think it has a bad reputation for some reason. Most likely it's because I think this is a powered down version of another card. But what this does is whenever your creatures are going to die, or whenever you have a token creature, you can pay a green to exchange that creature for the next creature in your deck. And oftentimes, that's really good. So I play this in Hapatra, who can turn the snake tokens into creatures, but you have a number of cards that create 1/2 spider tokens, and Evolutionary Leap can turn those all into your real spiders, many of which would create more tokens, which is particularly strong. And it is a sacrifice outlet for a few of your creatures that have on death effects. So I would consider that. That way you can play a few fewer spiders and still guarantee that you'll draw the spiders that you need. Um, there is a version of this deck, which I'm not going to suggest to you, but I will say out loud anyways for those who listen. There's a version of this deck that doesn't play that many spiders at all because Shelob herself can do everything you want her to do. However, I don't advise it. I'd still say to play a small amount of Death Touch spiders anyways, because then you still get power out of your bites and your bites and fights. I like that they rhyme. You still get power out of your bites and fights, which will be good. But if you really wanted to, you could play Shelob as your only spider. I don't know. I don't think it would be worth it. But I think those are the majority of my suggestions. I don't really see anything this deck is particularly missing. No Mercy stands out as being a little strange because I don't think you're going to be attacked a lot. You have low mana Death Touch creatures that you're not afraid to block with, so it feels a little strange to represent something so similar, a card that says, hey, if you attack me, it'll be destroyed. So I don't know about that. I think this can be replaced with any form of artifact or equipment that says block additional creatures, which there's only 2 Echo Circuit and Vanguard's Shield. I think those are fine because they just represent the same kind of effect, but you will get the creatures from, as long as you have a Death Touch creature, you will get those creatures reanimated as food on your side, whereas no Mercy does not do that. And then while I'm here, I think it can't hurt to look at 1 or 2 more Death Touch cards that might be within equipment that you might want to attach to something. And I'm going to say I don't particularly see anything. Like the best one would probably be Basilisk's Collar for the lifelink. But even then, like when Shelob's out, you don't really care. So instead, what if we look here for bow style cards? Deal damage, target creature. And then we'll put into our colors because red has this effect quite a bit. Sorted by mana value. Something even like Arc Spitter is fine because it just makes your creature unblockable, but it does make it very interestingly unblockable, where it can't. If it is blocked, you at least get to destroy the creature prior to damage, so your creature lives for 1 mana. Let's see. Pathway Arrows, Sorcerer's Wand. Any of these effects are great, especially the 1 mana ones, because the thing that usually holds back, yeah, Viridian Longbow, I imagine, is the classic here. The thing that makes these great is they're usually balanced around the amount of damage they do, with all of these generally doing like one damage. And when you have Death Touch, all of a sudden that doesn't matter anymore. And I do particularly like that. You have to make sure that it is the creature that deals damage and not the artifact. Though, like for example, Heart Piercer Bow doesn't work because the damage comes from the bow and not the creature. So you can't use that one. But Viridian Longbow or even, let's see, even Sorcerer's Wand. I think they're the same cost. Target player or planeswalker. Oh, this only hits players. So yes, okay. Viridian Longbow you should probably be playing because it turns your spiders into Avatar of Woes that you get the creature after. I think that's really, really strong. Okay, I think those are the majority of my suggestions. I think these are just directions that Shelob really, really provides a lot of power in. And at this point, the deck is right now just a spider tribal theme, but it's not really taking advantage of Shelob. So these are all my suggestions that I think will make Shelob very, very strong and feel like you're really playing her as opposed to playing a bunch of spiders with her at the helm. If you make another draft of this deck, I would love to see it. Or if you make any commander deck you want to show me, I'd love to see it. I have a form in the video description below that you can send to, and I will take a look at. And as always, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube thing, I'd be very grateful. The channel is growing, and it's always helpful to have a little more attention on it. I am excited to see another draft of Shelob. Shelob is terrifyingly strong, and I think the ceiling of this deck can be rather high. It will always have a limit because this is a creature-based deck that has certain limitations around it. But Shelob is so scary looking and scales so well with your opponent's power. Like as your opponents grow in power, like your opponent's decks, Shelob also grows in power because when you go from stealing, I don't know, um, creatures from an elf deck to stealing hate pieces or dark confidants or stealing, I don't know, just really powerful green and white cards, you're going to be very, very happy with the results. Like if you get Ranger, well, Ranger Captain of Eos you can't get because it sacrifices, but any creatures that tutor creatures, any creatures with even if you take any of those elves that come in and give you a land on ETB, you're going to be really, really happy to do so because not only have you destroyed one of their creatures, but you've also ramped yourself pretty easily. And creatures with no abilities as food are just food, which you can then use any way you want. I've gone quite a bit longer than I thought I would, but I think these videos have just generally increased in length. That's fine. Uh, food is something you can think about. I'm trying to end the video, but in my mind, I'm like, you know, you can think about using food. But yep, I'll leave it here. I hope this was helpful, and good luck.